On Mars, just west of a rocky little plateau called Home Plate, there is a machine roughly the size of a golf cart. It is frozen solid. Its wheels are buried in soft Martian soil. It has been sitting in that exact spot in silence for well over a decade. Its name is Spirit. NASA built it for a 90-day mission. It survived for more than 2,200. Along the way, almost entirely by accident, it rewrote what we thought we knew about Mars. In this video, we'll follow the full story of the rover that refused to quit, the discoveries it made on purpose, the discoveries it made by mistake, and the silence at the end. Spirit launched in June 2003. After a 7-month cruise, it reached Mars. It hit the upper atmosphere at over 12,000 miles per hour, and it had no engines to slow itself down. Engineers solved the problem with 3 layers of technology: a heat shield, a parachute, and, in the final seconds, a ring of inflatable airbags that wrapped the entire lander like a cocoon. Spirit hit the Martian surface, bounced, hit again, and rolled before coming to rest inside Gusev Crater. Gusev is a basin about 103 miles across. Scientists picked it specifically because they suspected it once held a lake. If they were right, Spirit was sitting at the bottom of an ancient body of water that had vanished billions of years ago. The mission's central goal was simple to state: find evidence that Mars was once warmer and wetter than it is today. If liquid water had flowed on the surface, then Mars might once have been habitable. Spirit was carrying an unusually clever scientific payload. The rock abrasion tool, or RAT, could grind away the weathered outer layer of a rock to expose fresh material underneath. A microscopic imager could photograph rock textures at extreme close range. An alpha particle X-ray spectrometer measured the elemental composition of samples. A Musk spectrometer identified iron-bearing minerals, and a full suite of cameras allowed the rover to navigate, survey, and photograph its surroundings. It was a beautiful instrument package, and on Sol 18 it almost became completely useless. Spirit went silent, not a temporary glitch, a full communications failure. Engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena worked around the clock to diagnose what had happened to their brand new rover, sitting alone on Mars about 88 million miles away. The cause turned out to be modest but dangerous. Spirit's flash memory had filled up with thousands of files. The system was trapped in a continuous reboot loop. Every time it tried to start, it crashed and started again. The fix required sending a software patch across 88 million miles of empty space and reformatting a critical piece of hardware on a robot they could not physically touch. It took 2 weeks. It worked. 6 weeks into a 90-day mission, Spirit had already proven the most important thing about itself. When it broke, the team would not let it stay broken. With Spirit back online, the real exploration began, and almost right away, Mars handed the science team a problem. The floor of Gusev Crater turned out to be covered in volcanic rock. If a lake had ever existed there, billions of years of lava flows had buried any evidence of it. So the team looked further away. About 1.9 miles to the east, a low range of hills rose above the crater floor. The Columbia Hills, named in honor of the Space Shuttle Columbia and its crew, lost the year before Spirit launched. The hills had never been part of the original mission plan. They were too far away. Spirit was not realistically expected to reach them. But the rover kept performing well past every expectation, so NASA committed to the journey. The drive took months. Across rocks, dunes, and loose soil, Spirit pushed itself and its operators to the limit. On Sol 156, it finally began climbing into the Columbia Hills, and it found something completely different from the volcanic plains below. Rocks altered by water, mineral textures shaped by long exposure to liquid environments. The hills told a story the crater floor had been hiding. Enjoy deep fact-check space stories? Hit subscribe and activate the notification bell. Otherwise, YouTube will not show you the next videos, and you'll miss what we uncover next. Spirit spent the next several hundred sols methodically working through the Columbia Hills. Each rock added a chapter to Mars' geological story. Wishstone, a fine-grained volcanic rock with chemical weathering. Watchtower, a layered outcrop full of evidence about ancient hydrothermal processes. And then there was Paso Robles. Paso Robles was not a planned discovery. Spirit was driving, repositioning itself for a better angle, and in the process, its wheels accidentally churned up a patch of soil. When the data came back, the team sat up. The exposed soil contained extraordinarily high concentrations of salt and phosphorus, levels suggesting that a lot of liquid water had once moved through that exact spot, depositing minerals as it evaporated or froze. Nobody had told Spirit to find that. Spirit just stepped on it. Some of the most important discoveries of the entire mission came from where the rover accidentally placed its wheels. Then, while Spirit was climbing toward Husband Hill, the planet itself helped. On Sol 421, a Martian dust devil swept directly over the rover. Dust devils are spinning columns of air that scour the surface as they move. This one walked across Spirit's deck and lifted off about a year's worth of accumulated dust from its solar panels. Power generation jumped from roughly 60% of original capacity to back over 90%. Nobody at JPL had planned that. Mars just did it. On Sol 581, Spirit reached the top of Husband Hill, the tallest peak in the Columbia Hills, about 328 feet above the crater floor. The rover paused there, as any explorer would after an exhausting climb. It looked around. The panorama Spirit captured from the summit is one of the most striking images ever taken from another planet. Hundreds of frames stitched into a sweeping view of Gusev's Plains, the rolling Columbia Hills, and the distant ridges of McCool and Ramon Hill catching the thin Martian light. In the foreground, Spirit's own deck, completely clean, dustless, evidence of those life-saving wind events. From the summit, Spirit also imaged both of the moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, tracking them across the night sky to refine measurements of their orbits. Even sitting still on a mountain on another planet, the rover was working. The descent from Husband Hill turned out to be just as productive as the climb. On Sol 690, Spirit's instruments analyzed a rock named Comanche and found something unexpected. Roughly a quarter of the rock was made of magnesium iron carbonates, about 10 times higher than anything previously measured on Mars. Carbonates form in liquid water, but they get destroyed by acidic conditions, so finding them in such high concentrations meant something specific. At some point in the planet's past, there were bodies of water that were natural or even mildly alkaline, conditions far more friendly to microbial life than the acidic environment suggested by other Martian rocks. Mars had not always been the same kind of unfriendly. It had been different kinds of unfriendly at different times. And in some of those times, life might have had a real chance. At the base of the Columbia Hills, Spirit reached one of the most geologically interesting features of the entire mission: Home Plate, a raised, roughly circular formation of layered, weathered rock about 295 feet across. The structure's origin pointed toward an ancient explosive volcanic event, probably superheated material blasting across a wet surface, baking sediment into the layered rock Spirit was now driving on. And then, in March 2006, one of Spirit's 6 wheels seized. The right front wheel had been showing increasing friction for months. Now it stopped turning entirely. Engineers at JPL ran exhaustive simulations on identical hardware back on Earth, trying everything they could think of. Nothing worked. Spirit would spend the rest of its life dragging that wheel behind it, a locked metal disc carving a continuous groove through Martian soil. And that groove changed history. In March 2007, Spirit was navigating around the western edge of Home Plate when the dragging wheel cut through the rust-red surface layer and exposed something startlingly bright. Almost white, completely unlike the surrounding terrain. Silica, nearly pure silica, concentrated at levels that match only 2 known geological processes: hydrothermal hot springs, where water dissolves silica in one location and deposits it elsewhere as it cools, or fumaroles, where steam and volcanic gases blast through rock and strip away everything except silica. Both environments here on Earth are places where life thrives. This discovery, later described by scientists as the most significant find of Spirit's entire mission, happened entirely because the rover was broken. If Spirit had been healthy, it would have rolled right over that patch of ground without disturbing it. The wheel everyone thought was a problem turned out to be a science instrument nobody designed. The years that followed got harder. Dust storms returned, solar panels got dirtier, memory anomalies began appearing in Spirit's onboard systems. By 2009, 2 of the rover's 6 wheels had failed completely. Power generation was hovering close to the minimum needed to keep the internal heaters running. Without those heaters, Spirit's electronics would freeze and die. On Sol 1892, Spirit drove into a patch of soil it could not get out of. The location was named Troy. Beneath a deceptive crust of normal-looking surface material was a deep layer of jarosite, an iron sulfate material with almost no cohesion. Spirit's wheels spun without finding traction. Every attempt to drive forward dug the rover deeper. For months, engineers on Earth built a replica of the trap in a JPL test facility. They tried combination after combination of wheel movements and driving angles. Nothing worked. On Sol 2155, NASA formally reclassified Spirit as a stationary research platform. It was a polite way of saying the rover was not going anywhere ever again. But it was not the end. Not yet. From its fixed position at Troy, Spirit kept studying the Martian atmosphere, examining the soil under its body, building up the kind of long-term meteorological record only a stationary instrument can provide. Its arms still worked. Its cameras still worked. It had stopped moving. It had not stopped being a rover. The final winter came in the southern Martian autumn of 2010. Temperatures dropped, power dropped with them. Spirit's available energy fell back to roughly 150 watt-hours per day, the absolute minimum needed to keep its heaters going through the night. Communication attempts became less frequent. The rover needed every watt it could collect just to stay warm. Around Sol 2208, Spirit experienced a low-power fault. The last confirmed signal from the rover was received on March 22, 2010. After that, silence. Spirit traveled 4.80 miles across the surface of Mars. It operated for 2,208 Martian sols, more than 24 times its intended mission duration. It transmitted over 128,000 images. It found evidence of ancient water, ancient volcanic activity, and ancient hydrothermal environments that on Earth would be called cradles of life. It found all of that because it kept going long after it was supposed to stop. The team running it refused to give up, and a broken wheel turned out to be a gift. Spirit's name was chosen through a NASA student essay competition. A 9-year-old named Sophie Kolis won. She had been adopted from a Siberian orphanage as a young child. In her essay, she wrote about looking up at the stars at night and feeling less alone. She named the twin rovers Spirit an opportunity for what those words had meant in her own life. There is an asteroid named after the rover today, 37452 Spirit. And on the deck of NASA's Perseverance rover, currently working in Gusev Crater on the other side of Mars, there is a small commemorative plate, a family portrait of every Mars vehicle that came before. Spirit is on it. Just west of home plate, on the slope where it got stuck, the rover is still out there, frozen, quiet, exactly where it stopped. The data it collected is still being studied. The maps it made are still being used. The questions it raised are still being answered. Some missions end. Spirits just kept turning it to the foundation for everything that came after. Here is something most retrospectives leave out. Spirit went silent in 2010, but the data it collected has not stopped producing new science. Researchers are still publishing papers based on what the rover saw, more than a decade after its last transmission. In 2016, 2 scientists at Arizona State University, Stephen Ruff and Jack Farmer, took a closer look at the silica deposits Spirit had exposed near home plate. They compared them to silica formations at El Tatio, a hot spring field in the Atacama Desert in Chile. El Tatio is one of the closest environmental analogs to ancient Mars that we have on Earth. High altitude, low pressure, strong ultraviolet radiation, volcanic hydrothermal activity. And the silica there forms in distinctive shapes, nodular and finger-like, built up by a combination of minerals and the activity of microorganisms living in the springs. When Ruff and Farmer compared photographs side by side, the structures looked nearly identical to what Spirit had photographed at home plate. Their paper appeared in Nature Communications. Their conclusion was careful and worth reading exactly as they wrote it. The Martian silica structures meet the formal scientific definition of a potential biosignature. They could not rule out a non-biological origin, but they could not rule out the alternative either. In other words, the most significant discovery Spirit made by accident may be even more significant than anyone realized at the time. And the analysis is not finished. In late 2024, a separate team of researchers led by anthropologist Justin Holcomb at the University of Kansas published a paper in Nature Astronomy with a different argument. Their proposal: the sites where humanity has left machines on Mars, including Spirit's final resting place at Troy, should be cataloged and protected as archaeological heritage. Not litter, not space junk. Heritage. The same way we treat the earliest human tools in East Africa or the first stone points in the Americas. From that perspective, Spirit is not just a broken rover sitting in the dirt. It is one of the first physical artifacts of a species expanding beyond its home planet. And someday, when humans walk on Mars, that small frozen machine on the slope west of home plate will be one of the first things future explorers come looking for. Spirit went silent on Mars, but there are two spacecrafts that left Earth nearly 5 decades ago, are still flying, and are now leaving the solar system entirely. The question is, why have they not built their successor yet? Watch Why Haven't We Yet Planned a Voyager 3 Yet to find out.